very good evening and welcome to Power News, your window to the power sector. In today's episode, we're going to have a discussion on industry expectations from new government and key policy changes required to revive the growth of power sector. And to discuss the same, we have been joined by Mr. Jayant Kavle, Managing Director, Hydro and Renewable Jindal Power, Mr. M.N. Ravi Shankar, CEO, Adhunik Power. We also have with us Mr. S.N. Goyal, MD and CEO, IEX India, and Professor Atmanand, Dean, MDI, Gurgaon. Very good evening and welcome to Power News. Mr. Kavle, on hydro front, country has not seen much development in last 5 to 6 years. Several projects are stuck and share of hydro is decreasing year by year. In a country like India where gas is in scarcity, hydropower could be a right choice to meet peaking power requirement. What are your expectations in terms of policy changes required to boost hydropower development in the country?
I think there are three things that need to be done on the hydro sector. One is that we have to simplify and streamline the environment clearance processes. Because if you see what is the biggest uncertainty that is being caused in the hydro sector, it is not the geological surprises which used to be the biggest uncertainty that can be managed. It is the uncertainty with respect to the environment clearance process that is holding up many of the projects. The Ministry of Environment and Forest needs to be proactive in devising policies and procedures which will ensure that the environment clearance process is faster without compromising on the environment concerns, mind you. I am not suggesting that we have to give a go-by to the environment concerns. For instance, the compensatory afforestation money, so-called CAMPA, about 35,000 crores, I am told, I do not have the exact figures, they are lying in some fund, but they are not being utilized. So, rather than concentrating on making the environment clearance process tougher and longer, we should ensure that the implementation which is lacking, and the example I gave you was CAMPA, that should be more streamlined. So, that is one part. The other part is you have a situation where states are not really willing to purchase hydropower, although in the long run, hydropower is the cheapest source of power. So, this short-termism in power procurement, that also needs to be addressed. Regulators need to ensure that peaking power is procured and long-term peaking power is procured. So, automatically, hydro will get the priority that it deserves. Regulators today are not ensuring that peaking power is procured. Third is on finance. The tariff structure today is so devised that finance which is for 12 years or 15 years has to be completely recovered in that period. Now, which makes the tariff front loaded. So, the first year tariff and the first few years tariff is much higher than the tariff which comes later on. So, that needs to be addressed by longer term financing.
Well, Mr. Kavle has pointed out three issues. One is the environmental clearances, second is that signing of PPAs with DISCOMs, and third being financing of hydropower projects. Mr. Ravi Shankar, according to you, what are the other issues concerning hydropower sector?
Unfortunately, we have been planning the country for 5-year plans, and unfortunately, the power sector is not a 5-year baby. It takes at least 7 to 10 years for gestation, even for thermal plant or hydro plant. So, once we are talking about development in 5 to 10 years, the policies have to be consistent with that. Unfortunately, a government comes today and changes the policy, tomorrow another government changes, it reverses. So, the investor does not know whether to invest or not to invest. And the government also, in getting the extra brownie points, they would like to clear the projects just at the end of the 3rd or 4th year, so that they can say that we have tied up this much. But actually that does not materialize because there was no intent at all. I will put the blame squarely on the government, whichever be the government, the then government. They lacked the foresight of predicting things or planning. It is purely a planning failure than implementation failures. No doubt from private sector or from government or even joint sector, there have been efforts from every developer to bring the project early, because either he has invested equity upfront or he has taken a bank finance. The moment project does not develop, the IDC kills the project. I have seen projects in hydro sector where 50% or 60% is IDC because the project got delayed. If I'm planning for 5 crores per megawatt, ultimately I have ended up 9 crores. And everywhere in the system, people say that you have invested more. They will not realize because of the policy troubles, these gentlemen had to delay the project.
Professor Atmanand, as states are reluctant to buy power from hydropower projects because in the initial years generally power is expensive and each power project requires 8 to 9 crores of funding. What are the issues related to financing of hydropower projects according to you?
Here in fact the banks and the financing institutions don't feel quite comfortable in terms of lending to the hydropower developers. Why is it so? It means all the hydropower projects are not bankable in the eyes of the lenders. So therefore, should it be run on the basis of grant or loan, or should it be run on the basis of purely on finance or equity? That should be the part of the business model. Today the business model is having a lot of risks in terms of price, in terms of low tariff, in terms of lack of buying by the DISCOMs and other users hydropower projects are concerned. Why is it that the state electricity boards and the bulk consumers are not interested in buying the power? Because they don't have buying capability, they don't have purchasing power to buy it because of their own balance sheet which is quite in the red. So therefore, the whole mechanism, the process of developing a business model has not been seriously thought out by our regulators.
See, the root cause of all these things is basically distribution reforms. All distribution companies knows that what is going to be the cost of hydro projects. It is going to be high in the initial years, it is going to be much lower in the future years. There are no fuel uncertainties, there are no cost escalations, fuel cost escalations in the hydro projects. Everybody knows about that, they also know about it. Only problem is they don't have money today to buy such kind of power. What we have to ensure today is financial health of the distribution companies, that improves. If that improves, I think most of these problems will be addressed.
We'll carry on this discussion, but after this short break, you keep watching Power News.
Indian Energy Exchange, India's premier power trading platform.
From manufacturing of energy cables to EHV installations to renewable energy solutions to retail energy products, our technology energizes lives. Ravin, energizing lives.
भरोसा, हिफाजत, मजबूती, कौन हर कोने में समाया होगा, कौन हर रोज तुम्हारे भरोसे पर खरा उतरेगा। किसके साए में गुजरेगी तुम्हारी जिंदगी। एक नाम जो देता आया है भारत की हर इमारत को बुनियाद, अब उसी पे खड़ा होगा आपका मकान। जिंदल स्टील एंड पावर पेश करते हैं जिंदल पैंथर, सच्चे सरिये की पहचान, पैंथर का निशान।
मैं नहीं सोऊंगा, मेरे बेड के नीचे मॉन्स्टर है।
रोहन, मॉन्स्टर्स रियल नहीं होते।
होते हैं मॉम, वो रात को मुझे हु हु करके डराता है।
अच्छा, अगर डर लगे तो लाइट ऑन कर देना।
अंधेरे में स्विच कैसे ढूंढूं? अगर मॉन्स्टर ने मेरा हाथ खा लिया तो?
अभी सो जाओ, कल देखते हैं।
Switch on to Monster Gone. L&T switches, easy to locate in the dark. The only switch with a 12-year warranty.
Power Grid Corporation of India, the central transmission utility, world-class integrated global transmission company with dominant leadership in emerging power market, ensuring reliability, safety and economy. Power Grid, building a smarter grid.
Mr. Kavle, earlier the problem was inadequate coal supply, but now it has been clubbed with no buyer. Or the power is available for ₹3 per unit on exchange, it goes unsold, and even in election time, states are opting for severe power cuts. How do you see this situation?
Today we have a situation in the country where the PLF has come down. PLF, which was in the 70s, has now come down to about 66, 65. So, a lot of capacity is remaining idle. Secondly, you have load shedding. You have consumers who are willing to pay, but they are not getting power. And thirdly, you have utilities which are bankrupt. So, there is something obviously wrong. This is an immense market failure that needs to be addressed. Now, in a city like Gurgaon, where I live and where Professor Atmanand also comes from, we have a situation where the paying capacity of the consumer is virtually endless, because they are mostly dependent on diesel generators when the utility does not give them power. So, how is it that there is power going a-begging in the market? There are consumers who are actually paying much more, and the cost of diesel is coming to now 18 rupees a unit. Leave aside the capital cost for the generating set. And the utility is not bringing these two together and bringing down the cost for the consumer from 18 rupees to whatever, 7, 8 rupees, and the power also will get dispatched. But this market failure is not being addressed.
I still remember when I had given an offer to a state like Haryana itself, that we will supply to Gurgaon 200 megawatts at 5 rupees tariff only for residential customers who are willing to pay. The bureaucrats and the government machinery said, we don't want to do. The moment you supply to Gurgaon, the Faridabad consumers will make an hue and cry, which I cannot manage. So if I cannot make poor rich, at least I can make rich poorer, so that all are equal.
Poor financial health of DISCOMs does not allow them to buy power in short-term market, and they prefer load shedding. Don't you feel without improving the financial health of DISCOMs, power sector growth cannot be revived?
The financial health of the distribution company, that is the most important aspect of the whole power sector revival and addressing the issues. Today, with almost about 950 units per capita consumption, and we still talk about generating stations not getting scheduled, I think there is something wrong somewhere. So, it is not that we are able to supply power to everybody. We are doing rampant load shedding in most of the states and still not buying the power, because distribution companies are not in a position to pay for what they buy. So, we have to create that capacity, and if distribution companies are not able to create that capacity, we have tried it in the last 10-12 years, lot of distribution reform initiatives were taken, but nothing much has happened. So, I think separation of this wire and supply business, that is something if taken up, a large part of the cost will get detached from the distribution company. They will be only dealing with the wire business. Then you can have more suppliers, and the customers who are willing to pay for the power, they can buy the power to the suppliers.
Mr. Kavle, what are your views on segregation of wire and supply business?
Well, let me just add to what Mr. Goel has said. Yes, separating wires from supply is a good idea, but the way currently that amendment is drafted, it says that supply licenses will be given for supplying only to open access consumers. Now, if you do not have open access consumers, obviously this will remain on paper. So, along with this new concept in India at least of separation of wires from supply, you also had to ensure open access. Without that, it is not going to work.
Although Electricity Act has a provision of open access, but it is still not a reality. What needs to be done to ensure effective implementation of open access?
When we talk about the open access, unfortunately, fortunately, I also come from Gurgaon. I want to supply power to my residential complex through open access. The last mile connectivity is always missing. From the substation end to my end, the regulations now says that if you have a dedicated feeder, then I will allow you open access. Otherwise, there are other consumers on that line. I cannot allow you open access. With this, what is happening? My 5 megawatt load of my area, we are dependent on the substation. So So I can get open access to my substation, but not from substation to my house. This has to be resolved.
If you do the cost benefit analysis of 1 megawatt retail consumers of any institutions, of any organizations, if they are buying power from PTC, Power Trading Corporation, or from India Energy Exchange, seems to be very viable, because the price that they are paying for the DISCOM power, thermal power, say Dakshin Haryana Bijli Vitran Nigam Limited, and if they are buying power from the exchange on day ahead basis, and since they are managing their load curve and forecasting the demand for consumption of power for the next 1 week, it seems to be very viable proposition for the institutions to go for the open access. Now, why it is not successful? Simply because the instruments and the technology which is required, independent feeder, etc., that is required, that is not there. And sometimes the regulators also create problems for the 1 megawatt power consumption. Maruti does have its own captive power plants, and they want to go for retail consumers under 1 megawatt, but they are not being allowed to do so. Similarly, Tata Power in Delhi, they are ready to sell the power under open access to residents of Gurgaon, but they are not being allowed to do so.
We'll quickly take another short break. Keep watching Power News.
Indian Energy Exchange, India's premier power trading platform.
Jal, jal, jal.
जल से जल तक, मेगावाटर्स से मेगावाट्स तक, SJVN Limited.
Power Finance Corporation, the most preferred financial institution, providing affordable and competitive products and services with efficient and internationally integrated sourcing. PFC, partnering the reforms in the Indian power sector.
Mr. Kable, free power or subsidized power to certain section of consumers is another major problem which sector has been facing. What are your views on cross subsidy in power sector?
There are farmers who require electricity for 4-5 hours a day for protective irrigation, and there are farmers like banana farmers who require virtually 24 hours a day. Farmers who have access to water and therefore who will consume a lot of electricity to draw that water, and farmers who have no access to water and therefore they are not able to utilize that so-called subsidy of electricity. There is a huge regional disparity. There is a huge disparity from within a district or within a taluka. What we are forgetting is that most of this subsidy is probably going to those who really don't deserve it to the extent that is given to them. Why can't these cash crops have limited subsidy? I am not. Somebody should need to calculate how much subsidy should go into these crops and how much is actually going. If you really analyze it, the figures will be startling.
Mr. Ravi Shankar, let me take your views on cross subsidy.
In 2004 elections in Andhra Pradesh, the Congress said we will give free power to agriculture. So they came to power. The first file what the then Chief Minister signed after overtaking was free power to agriculture, because it was an electoral promise. For last 10 years it is continuing, and the misery of the people is that from a surplus state like Andhra Pradesh has gone into deficit, and from a zero subsidy regime it has gone to 6,000 crore deficit regime again.
The biggest challenge for the new government would be to encourage the states to take up power reform initiatives, as electricity being the concurrent subject. Mr. Ravi Shankar, how challenging you think it is going to be for the new government?
Every regulatory system should give full cost tariffs. When I say full cost tariffs, they should determine the tariff scientifically and say that for every consumer what it costs they should give. Then the section 64, which allows the subsidy, the process becomes more transparent. I say that for a supplying to agriculture is 2 rupees. Let government come in and say I want to give free power. Let them give the 2 rupees. The consumer should pay 2 rupees and get refund from government. Universal service obligation for all consumers. The regulatory order should be on yearly basis, and every consumer should be paid full tariff. If government wants to subsidize, let them publicly say that I will give. And if they don't give the tariff, they should be charged the full cost tariffs. Until as this happens, I think financial reforms cannot happen. I think we are in for third generation reforms. First, they invited private sector to come into the generation. Second, they done the unbundling of the distribution companies. Now, the focus should be on unbundling the distribution companies into wires company and let retail competition happen among the consumers and the generators.
I think some of these suggestions are extremely important and very, very basic. If anybody, whether it's a farmer or anybody, a subsidized consumer gets a real bill of the power that he has consumed and he has to pay, and then he has to claim subsidy from government, then it will come out in the open who is getting how much subsidy. Then it will be a subject of debate and discussion, including in the assembly, that look, this district is getting so much subsidy, this district is getting only so much subsidy. This group of farmers are walking away with all the subsidy, whereas a large majority is not getting any subsidy. Then the discussion and debate will happen. Today it is swept under the carpet, because who is getting what nobody knows. So, we need not discuss it.
Would you like to add something?
In many of the states, leaving aside 2-3 states like Gujarat, Goa, Punjab, Haryana, not much investment has been made in the distribution sector, particularly by the distribution companies. Distribution companies are not in a position to buy power and supply to the end consumers. See, if we look at per capita consumption of states like Bihar, I think it is less than 200 units, much lower than the national average. That state is not in a position to buy more power because they do not have distribution infrastructure to supply power also. Many of the states do not have the adequate metering infrastructure to ensure what kind of energy is being supplied to which consumers. So, what is important is we create this distribution infrastructure, we do proper energy accounting, and we are able to then fix the accountability. We are talking about substitute agricultural sector. We do not know how much of energy we are consuming in the agricultural sector. All that losses are basically booked under the agricultural consumption. So, we have to make investment in the distribution sector, create proper distribution system to cut down the losses, metering, energy accounting, and then accountability.
Professor Atmanand, I'd like to know that what would be the major challenges for the new government to bring power sector growth momentum back to track with 10% growth rate?
The major challenge before the new government would be to create a fund, long-term funds and capital base required for investment into the power sector, all sectors of the power. Second, the important challenge before the new government would be to see to this problem like land acquisition, the environment clearance and forest clearances should not be a hindrance into the growth of the power sector. And the third thing, that the new government will have to show the political will to solve the problems of the power business in our country.
Well, with this last comment, we come to an end of this discussion. I'd like to thank all the panelists for joining us here in Power News. Thank you.